right, we'll go live in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is McKaylee. I work at Tattered Cover Bookstore. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for excuse me. Thank you for supporting local independent bookstores. Thank you for shopping locally. It means more to us than you'll ever know. It's the reason that we are still here this year and the past 50 years, as it is Tattered Cover's 50th anniversary in 2021, which is amazing. And we owe a large part of that success to you, our community, both virtual and in person, which we're slowly but surely getting ourselves back to. So thank you all for supporting us in as many ways as you can, by both watching our videos, shopping online, coming into the store when you can. Thank you so much. Before I go any further, I want to let you know that closed captioning is enabled on this video for those who might want it or need it. There's a black bar at the bottom of the screen with a button labeled CC on it. Click that button and closed captioning is enabled should you want it or need it. And for those of you who may be joining us outside of the Denver metro area, Tattered Cover is a local independent bookstore located in Colorado with currently 4 locations, one of which we just opened today, which is an incredible, amazing feat. We did that this morning. It was our grand opening for our new McGregor Square location. So if you're in downtown across the street from Coors Field at 20th and Wazee, you can come and visit our brand new store. And later in the month, our children's store at Stanley Marketplace is going to be open as well. So we thank you all for your support, and we look forward to seeing you at our brand new stores. But if you aren't able to come in, or you want to shop online, stay in your pajamas, I completely understand. You can do that at tatteredcover.com, and we can serve all of your bookish needs. And you can purchase all of your books online through us and get them shipped, or pick them up at your nearest location. Also online is our events. And oh my gosh, we have so many. And I say that because I'm hosting a good 90% of them. And so we have so many amazing upcoming events. We have Paul Howarth, who his new book, Dust and the Bowl, is, yeah, it's about the Dust Bowl. Anyway, you can check that out. That's on Monday. We have amazing authors coming up later in the week, later in the month. You can register for those. But if you missed any of our virtual events, our whole catalog is on our YouTube channel, which is what you're watching us on right now. But I want to talk about the author that we have today. I'm very excited for this one. We're talking about the book Garden to Glass, which was actually our cookbook of the month a while back here. But we're talking to Mike Wolf and talking about Garden to Glass and his newest book that's coming out later in July, which we'll hear more about. But a little bit about our author today. Mike Wolf opened and established the bar program at Husk in Nashville, Tennessee, and spent the next 5 years developing a hyper-seasonal and dynamic style of cocktails and non-alcoholic drinks, utilizing on-site gardens, the bounty of Middle Tennessee, and a home garden where he grew up, upwards of 30 different varieties of herbs, vegetables, and all for the purpose of making cocktails and elixirs. His drinks have been featured in Imbibe magazine, Local Palate magazine, and the Tennessean and Foodable TV network, and more. And we're so excited to have him here to talk about Garden to Glass and give us a bit of a preview and demonstration about some of his cocktails. So it's my honor to welcome Mike to the screen here. We're going to turn it over so everybody can see him. And hello, Mike. Good to see you. Look at you outside in the bright sunshine.
Great to see you. Yeah, I only do events and gardens now.
I love it. It's perfect and so on brand.
Got to stay on brand these days.
No, I love it. I'm so excited to be doing this today, and it's something perfect and ideal to start our summer off right. So I'd love it if you could give us a taste of what the book is and then show us your demonstration about one of your drinks, if not more.
You bet. So Amy Stewart, who wrote The Drunken Botanist, when I sent her my book and I had met her at Husk and did like a special cocktail menu for her based on her book and told her someday I'm going to write a book, and when I do, I'll send it to you. And so when I did send it to her, she said, Garden to Glass is a back to the land cocktail manifesto. And I thought, gosh dang, you're so good. And so that's the best description, in terms of brevity that I could think of. And I wish I had thought of it. But basically, it's incorporating the natural world into the drinks that you love to make, incorporating ingredients from your garden, how to start a garden, real straightforward tips about that. If you only have 3 feet by 3 feet and you want to dig out a garden, you can do it. It's easy. You just need some sunlight and love. And so many of the drinks that we love, from the gin and tonic that we're going to talk about later, to the Tom Collins, to even old fashions, there's so many ingredients from all around the world that go into all these drinks. So it was fun to just tackle that topic, because I was, doing nothing but that for 6 or 7 years in Nashville.
That's amazing. I'm a huge old fashioned fan myself. Brandy old fashions are my jam. And so I love the fact that you're bringing us back to our roots, literally, and being able to, we can do it ourselves, which is really exciting to think about here. So speaking of which, you've got some examples for us, and you mentioned the gin and tonic, and I'd love to see what you've got whipped up for us and show us how to make today.
You bet. So I'll just step over here if that's good.
Sounds awesome.
Let me make sure I've got my setup in order here. So there are 2 drinks in Garden to Glass that I'm going to do a little mashup of here. And they're 2 of my favorite summer drinks. The gin and tonic, and it's like European style gin and tonic, where they're using botanicals, either that marry with the ingredients that are used in the gin or that go really well with the gin. And they make a lighter style gin and tonic that's nice for summer, where you don't use maybe 2 ounces of gin, maybe use 1 ounce to 1.5 ounces of gin. And you can add all these ingredients at the bottom of the glass. And I talk about it a lot in Garden to Glass, infuse as you booze. So a lot of times when you're using a garnish in a drink, say you have cucumber, like we have blackberries, we have some lovely rosemary, basil today, lemon, the oils from the lemon. If those are all in your glass, the drink changes as you drink it, becomes this immersive experience. That's really what encapsulates a lot of the drinks that are in the book. So today we're going to mash up a European style gin and tonic with all these ingredients in the glass with a bramble. And I have the bramble is in Garden to Glass 2 ways, where you can use a French style blackberry liqueur, or what I would recommend is just to use in season fresh blackberries. So today we've got some beautiful blackberries, and we have some perfect lemons. So what we're going to do, we're going to start out by taking, since I've got a lot, why don't I just put 3 in there? You could do 2 or 3. Blackberries, put those at the bottom of the glass. We're going to take some lemon, I call them quarters, little wedges. We're going to throw those in there. We've got some lovely basil from the garden here. And we're just going to tear. We're going to tear those a little bit, throw those in there, so that aroma will start releasing. And then we've also got some really pretty rosemary right here. So some things in terms of flavor affinity just make sense. Lemon and rosemary, basil and blackberries, basil and strawberries. All these things just really make sense together. So we've got all this here. And, I was looking around the house today for a muddler. Didn't have one. It's easy. Use the bottom of a wooden spoon. Really use anything. So we're just going to get in there and kind of lightly. You don't need to muddle super hard. You're just breaking up the blackberries, releasing some of that juice. We're getting in there on the lemon. We're just pressing that down. And one of the things about muddling citrus and or citrus peel, we're going to talk a little bit about the old-fashioned in just a little bit. But when you're muddling citrus and muddling the citrus peel, and what I've got here, now see, I've already got this beautiful concentrate right here. I've got rosemary, I've got basil, I've got lemon, I've got blackberries. And so I take that's my lovely little concentrate. And you wouldn't believe how amazing that smells. So it's a whole world of flavor right here in this glass. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our ice, and this will kind of trap this stuff down on the bottom a little bit. And it will eventually float up to the top, but this just makes it a little bit easier to make the drink. So we've got our ice. This is the Leopold's Gin, shout out, Colorado. Columbine graduates, Leopold's, and I will say, even in Nashville, Tennessee, there are huge fans of this stuff. I think we're still waiting to get it in Nashville, but these guys are just awesome. So I love this gin. I'm doing 1.5 ounces. You can do more, obviously. You can do less. I love the quote, and I believe it's in the book, where Craig Schoen, who runs a Spanish restaurant in Nashville, and I talked to him about European-style gin and tonics, and he said, if they were drinking gin and tonics as strong as we do over in Spain, they'd have to do even more blow, which I thought was an amazing quote. So I had to pass that along. But you're looking for light. Then you can kind of while away the afternoon. So we've got our 1.5 ounces of gin. We've got our tonic. There's a million amazing tonics out there right now. This is the elderflower tonic from Fever Tree, but there's tons of them out there. If you find a nice tonic syrup that you like, you can marry some of those tonic syrups with all the amazing sparkling waters that are out there now. Strawberry flavored, lemon lime flavored. So there's all these things you can do now with gin and tonics. That is just incredible. Then all we're doing is just kind of stirring that around. We've got a beautiful violet color. We're just kind of stirring that around. We've got so much going on in there. And then we're just going to add a little bit more garnish to the top so that we've just got aroma coming everywhere. Now, even for looks, we could throw in, and if we want a little snack later, we could throw a blackberry on top right there. This is fully Instagrammable. And we've got some of this lovely basil we'll toss in there. And there we have it. I'm sure we could put more in there, but we don't need any more.
Share that with us, sir. Oh, that's gorgeous.
So there we go. Serve it in your...
This is where I'm really angry we're not in person.
You really need to try this. Don't
Yes.
you love when people say that and they're on camera? You really need to try this.
Are you kidding me? When you were talking about the smells alone, I was already hooked. You hadn't even added the gin yet, and I was down.
And so what's amazing about this, I have my ingredients here kind of trapped under the ice. As I drink it, they will float up. I could even have a little straw in here, stir that around. As I get to the middle of this and as I get to the bottom, I'm going to be tasting more herbs, more blackberries, more of that lemon oil, those essential oils from the lemon. That's one of the biggest tips I can give, those essential oils from citrus. If you can get those in your glass or in your drink somehow, you'll say, why is this so good? Why is this so amazing? And you just put fresh essential oil from citrus that you've washed into your glass, and that, along with anything that you've got from the garden, anything seasonally, you can make simple, amazing drinks that way.
Well, and it was amazing. You did that in like less than 10 minutes. It was less than 5, really. And it was so easy to watch you do that. And I know that you're an expert, but as somebody who, I don't know, I'd like mixed drinks served to me rather than I make them myself. But
Yeah, sure.
I feel very confident being able to tackle something like that if I have those ingredients. That's amazing.
And people like to make drinks like the mojito more complicated than they need to be, but a mojito is really simple. Grab a bunch of mint from your garden, wash it, throw it in the bottom of your glass, throw a tablespoon of sugar in there, maybe a little dash of bitters, muddle that around. You've got your own little concentrate there. Smell that. You're going to smell some amazing things. And then all you need is what? Rum and a little bit of soda water, maybe some lime juice.
Yeah. Wow. See, I love you distilling it down to something so simple and so accessible to a lot of people as well. Do you have anything else you want to show us, or shall we come back for some questions?
So I can show you from the new book coming out July 20th, called Bartentine, Recipes, Tips, and Stories to Enjoy at Home, a pandemic book and a kind of a time capsule. I had over 55 different bartenders from all around the country, most of them from Nashville, some from Chicago, some from New York, some from Los Angeles, a few from Denver, from Sunday Vinyl. We've got Brandon in there, and there's a bunch of great recipes in there, how bartenders got through the pandemic, what they did to cope, the drinks that they made at home. I think what was really interesting and what kind of really started to hone that book together was the fact that a bunch of bartenders who typically are not making that many drinks at home, just like a cook, I make the analogy that like chefs aren't coming home and whipping up a wood-fired beet salad. They're having a PBR and eating some Doritos and wondering why is it so hard to make something so delicious as a Dorito? It's the same thing with bartenders. They come home, they drink a Tecate and, and think about the night that they just had. But over the pandemic, people really got into making drinks at home. They missed their jobs. They missed their craft. I definitely did. So a lot of what I love to make at home are old fashions, martinis, Negronis, margaritas, just the cocktail Mount Rushmore, the bedrock of all cocktails, the mother sauces. So what I wanted to do today, and I've got a lot of those recipes in the book, in the new book, Bartentine, in a chapter called Comfort Booze, 9 essential cocktails to make at home, where you only need about 5 to 6 bottles, and you can make a lot of the bare bone essentials of the cocktail canon. We'll talk about the old fashioned. And my only real simple tip for the old fashioned is all in how you use citrus and how you might use citrus peel. So if you have a little peeler, you can have a white peeler, a vegetable peeler. And this is something that you could practice if you really want to master it. And what you're working on is to get as little pith as possible. So you can see there's really not much pith there at all. And that's what you want to practice with as light a hand as possible, getting in there and just getting little parts of the citrus peel with as little pith as possible. Put that at the bottom of the glass, and you can add a little bitters to it. Say this was simple syrup, you would add a little bit of your simple syrup in there, and then it's just muddling. And so you just lightly muddle that citrus peel. You've got some bitters in there, maybe some simple syrup, maple syrup, and then take, say, 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces of bourbon, pour that in, stir that around, let it sit for 5 minutes. And that's really the basis for an amazing old fashioned. It's really just as simple as a citrus peel that has as little pith as possible. And there is so much flavor in that. So what I want y'all to try at home is as thin a citrus peel as you can get it, a 1/8 of an ounce to 1/4 ounce, maybe a teaspoon if you don't like a lot of sweet, of maple syrup, of a sorghum, of a simple syrup. Add a few dashes of bitters, and between that peel and the sweetness and the bitters, muddle that lightly. You don't need to crush it. You're just getting the oil out of the citrus peel. Smell that, and that's your old-fashioned concentrate. And it'll amaze you. People always used to say, why is this the best old-fashioned I've ever had? And I would just say, well, it's just a little bit of citrus peel in there, and that's really all it is. It just brightens it up. You can use strong whiskey. You can use rye. But it's those little details that I talked about a little bit in Garden to Glass, and then I talked about a lot in Bartentine as well, some of the simple ideas.
Well, I want to let everyone know that they can pre-order Bartentine on our website at tatteredcover.com, as well as get copies of Garden to Glass. Those are in store or online, but Bartentine you can pre-order today. Mike, come back and join me and we'll answer some questions from the audience and some questions about both of these books, because they're quite incredible feats, and learning more about Bartentine is so fascinating to hear who you interviewed and what they were doing over quarantine. Yes, please sip that for us and just make us all jealous. Cheers.
I wouldn't believe how good this is.
Oh, I'm so no, seriously, like I very much after this, I have like one more event later today, and I'm like, that's what I'm making when I'm done.
Bramble gin and tonic. I should have thought of it when I did the book.
That is
I'll have to put it in the next one.
It's amazing. So I want to ask you, where did this love start for you? Did it start with gardening? Did it start with bartending? Where did this fire for this passion ignite in your life?
I think it was really just being into food. It's funny, one of my old friends is here. We used to watch like live streams on an AOL feed and QuickTime player of like Pearl Jam playing a benefit show where the screen was like 1 inch by 1 inch, and we were sitting there. So it's great to have Jeremy over here, Jeremy Curzio. But back in the day, like one of my nicknames was Food. I had a friend, he just called me Food because I could eat a lot. I loved food. I talked about food. Um, I've always been into food, and then that just kind of grew into getting into drinking and learning about wine, learning about spirits. I bartended pretty early. I bartended before I was even 21 in Boulder, Colorado, back when that was legal. I don't know if it's legal now. It was then. And I think just the more I did it, and then I left, I got into radio here in Denver. I was working at KCUV, which was on air from about 2002, 2003, I think it was, till about 2008. Once I left radio for a while, I got back into bartending. I was at the Avenue Grill in Denver when the cocktail boom was really taking off, and they were doing some just beautiful classics there. So once I really got into the Manhattan, that was like the drink that really set it off for me, because I realized that there's not a lot to this drink, but you can make it wrong to where it's just not going to be good. If you make it right, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. You have bourbon, you have sweet vermouth, you have bitters, and a little cherry at the end. But if you think about the sweet vermouth, where's it coming from? How fresh is it? How am I taking care of it? Am I keeping the top on? Am I keeping it cold? Am I using it within 2 to 3 weeks? And then how much bitters am I using? Am I not using too heavy of a hand? Am I using the right whiskey with the sweet vermouth? All these things. That's really what started it for me, and turned the light on in my head that was like, there is so much detail to this profession. And I just love that. I love the details of things. And it just really took off from there. When I got to Nashville, I started working at a really progressive, forward-thinking, experimental cocktail bar called the Holland House, RIP. But it was really eye-opening that all these great bartenders were experimenting with different ingredients. And one of the things that really kickstarted Garden to Glass and thinking about these different things for me was we were running out of blackberries at Holland House one day. And I was like, well, I was on a bike ride the other day. I saw these wild blackberries on the bike path. And why don't we just go get those? And people were like, what? No, whoa, really? And then, people start thinking, and then you're like, you're going to pick your own blackberries. And then you see honeysuckle sitting there and you're like, why am I not using this stuff? Why would I go to the grocery store to buy these things when they're just sitting right here? And then that really opened up the natural world for me, and starting a garden. And when I was at Husk, I was going through the garden and using different herbs, and I'd get a knock on the window from one of the chefs like, no, what are you using? You're using all the lovage. And they were basically, after a while, they were like, if you want to use all these herbs, you'd probably want to grow them yourself. And so I said, okay, I will. And just started growing, tons of stuff. So
that's amazing, though. What a wonderful journey to hear about all the different aspects that came into creating this book and this career for you and building this fascination. Because it's something that it's so detailed, and not everybody thinks about it when they're ordering a drink. It reminds me of one of my favorite books called Last Call at the Nightshade Lounge, which is about like different cocktails that give you superpowers. It's a sci-fi. Don't worry about it. But
I love it.
But it's so good, by Paul Kruger. But in the book, there's like all the recipes for the different cocktails. And it talks about the detail and the science and how you're not going to get the superpowers if you don't make it right. And what's fascinating to me, and you talk about details, and the level of experimentation, because in a way you all are scientists, and do you ever see drink making like that or bartending to be a sort of scientific exploration?
Really only when I'm in a job interview would I kind of bring that out. Like,
that's fair. Is it more of an art then? Would you consider it more of an art than a science experiment?
I think so. I think that once you get to the distilling, I have been making during the pandemic, I've really gotten into with a winery in Nashville, making vermouth. And then you start to get into more like fermentation and thinking about science. Now, anytime I've gone and gotten like behind the scenes tours at distilleries and things like that, that to me, that's really science. That's really intense stuff. I do think of cocktails and creative cocktails as more of an art and as more of a creative thing, because there's so much trial and error that goes into it. you know when you just don't have it, when you don't have something right. Like you have an idea in your head and you're like mezcal and strawberries and beets and this, and then maybe you take it a little too far and you're like, I need to remove one ingredient because this is just too much. Nobody's gonna like this. So it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of creativity, and I guess I do think of it as more of an art.
No, I think that's fascinating, and it's so interesting, this level of creativity that you get to play with these ingredients, both from the earth and, what I don't know, what are typical, what we're buying from the store in that way. I'm curious though about the transition you made into writing a book about it all. You know what I mean? Because some people are like, why a book? It could be a blog or a video. What was that impetus to write a book and share this knowledge with others in that way?
I've always written. I've always loved writing. I've always thought, it was one of the best things that I did. It's a hard thing to make a living doing. And I think I had various people that would come through Husk and I would talk to them about, oh, I grew this, check this out. Check out this drink I'm making with it. I'm doing this. I made this cordial. And a lot of people would say like, you should write a book like that, and so I got a lot of encouragement that way from people. And I really think it was reading MFK Fisher, A Cordial Water. That was really a big one for me because it was not at all a cocktail book. Really, it was about drinking. It was about making like home remedies. But it had I had never read anything like that, where it was stories from just her whole world, her whole all her travels, different home remedies that she saw along the way, really simple ways to make bitters, and these like herbal concoctions. And so I just once I read that book, because it didn't really make as much sense for me to do a cocktail book. It was like, well, I could just do recipes, and that just wasn't as compelling for me. But once it was like stories from your life and building your own garden, kind of doing things your own way, trial and error, I thought I could do this. This would be really cool if I could pull this off.
That's my niche. I found it. That's
Yeah.
wonderful to hear. I do want to encourage, we've had a lot of activity in the chat so far. And so I do want to encourage any of our viewers to ask questions or comments along the way. Please do. Just so you know, a couple of love shout outs here. Woohoo. Yeah, bud. Welcome back to Denver from Frankie. Jessica says, hey, Michael, this all sounds super refreshing. Brian says, Avenue shout out. And he does have a question. He says, we have more lemon balm and pineapple sage in our garden than we know what to do with. Any suggestions for summer cocktails using those? So pineapple sage and lemon balm.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. So one of the things that I love with lemon balm is anything to do with like iced tea. And so if you just made a simple batch of iced tea and serve that up with like bourbon, muddle some lemons in there. So start with just your empty glass, quarter some lemons, throw those in the bottom of the glass, throw your lemon balm on top of the lemons. If you wanted to sweeten it a little bit, like, sweet tea, like we like down in the South, you could do that. Muddle that, throw in your tea, throw in 1.5 ounces of bourbon or so, and you'd have a really good summer refresher. Pineapple sage, I would say that with the pineapple sage, with that little bit of like tropical vibe to it, you could mix that with a little bit of mint and make like a really kind of savory mojito. I think that would be incredible. And I would say too, if you have too much lemon balm, I would cut it. It's going to keep growing. Just cut some off and dry it. And you'll notice how the flavor will intensify as you dry it. So just hang it up in a room that's well ventilated. You could throw a fan on it to get it to dry perfectly. You could turn it a little bit, rotate it every couple days. But drying things like lemon balm, it really intensifies the flavor. And you can start to make your own teas. And you can use those ingredients, those dry ingredients, all through the winter too. So that's an easy way to use them.
I'm in awe of this superpower you have. He just gave you 2 ingredients and you're like, here's 4 drinks that was like 4 things you can do. And I mean, it makes sense. There's people that like who I work with who you can just come up and be like, hey, I need a book recommendation for a 11-year-old who likes this, you know, and they can spit it out. But it's so fun to see somebody talk about their life's work and their knowledge in this way. It's so much fun. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And so, okay, Brian did say, sounds great. Thanks, Mike. We'll definitely be drying some. That's a great
Awesome.
suggestion. So,
oh, great.
Yeah. Another great question is, were there any recipes or any stories that you didn't get to put into Garden to Glass that you wish you would have?
Oh man, that's a good question. Let me think here. Hmm.
That's why you wrote a second book, though, isn't it? I know it's combos of other people's, but you got to put other things in there.
That is a tough one. I think it's really like the sustainability aspect of everything. I do talk about Tapache in the book a little bit, but I don't necessarily tell the story as much. So when I was writing Garden to Glass, I was getting ready to open this tiki bar, Chopper. It took 2.5 years almost to kind of get it all together. There was a lot of experimentation going on with pineapples at that time and making pineapple syrups, juicing them, trying to use everything we could. And, you know, there was one day where I realized we had like this stack of pineapple rinds, and I was like, well, we need to make Tapache. And so we made this huge batch of it, and it doesn't take long to ferment. And what we ended up doing is steeping herbs kind of after a few days after it had fermented. We steeped a bunch of herbs into it, and we had this like really delicious drink that was non-alcoholic. And that's a really easy way that if you like using pineapple, you can definitely use the rinds, because those natural yeasts that are in the rind, they're buried deep in there. Even when you're washing off your pineapple and everything, they're in there, and they will create these amazing kind of umami flavors from fermentation, just from the rind themselves. So,
okay, this is my ignorance coming through, but what is Tapache?
Yeah, so Tapache is basically a sparkling pineapple beverage that's really popular in Mexico, Colombia, all over Latin America. And it's just a simple way to take the pineapple rinds and make your own, basically like a little cider from them, or a kombucha. You can add spices to it. That's really common in Mexico. They'll add a little cinnamon and nutmeg. And so I do have a recipe for a smoked Tapache in there from making a smoked pineapple syrup, but I didn't really get into the story as much as like why I've had so much pineapple to work with over the last few years. It was from research and tiki drinks, which is dangerous.
Thank you for sharing. My partner's allergic to apples, so we don't get to do ciders a lot unless it's like pear or something, and then people still use apple juice as a sweetener, and so we don't get to use that a lot. But pineapples, okay,
yeah,
I have ideas now.
Check the Tapache recipe from the book as kind of a template, and you could do it as easy as you want, but it ferments really easy, and you'd be surprised at how delicious what you could make, how delicious it is.
I'm so excited. That's awesome.
Keep me posted.
Yeah, no, for sure. Another great question here has to do with Bartentine, and it's, how did you reach out to the bartenders, and what was their experience like? Can you give us a hint as to what's to come in this book?
Yeah, so I started to feel really bad, because once we had the idea to do the book, and it was just going to be an ebook to raise money for Tennessee Action for Hospitality, who was doing all these grants for hospitality workers who were just in trouble at that point. And so I started just reaching out to people, and was just like, hey, I know it's like kind of a tough period right now, but I would love to hear your thoughts. And so I put together like a questionnaire that was just like, you know, what are you up to right now? How are you getting through this? How has this been for you? What has helped you? Where do you see bartending going? Are you making any cool cocktails at home? Let's hear the recipes. It felt kind of weird to like be hounding people for it, but people were really cool and gave really just honest, heartfelt responses. So it is a really cool snapshot of 2020.
No, that's amazing too, because it's going to be, and it already is, such a historic period in our history as humans. And it's something that, you know, is weirdly well documented, but we're going to be able to see the different sides of how it affected so many professions, so many different cultures, so many different people. And I think that having something from the hospitality side and F&B is huge, because, you know, we all thought about deliveries and stuff, but there's something about bartending that wasn't there, and getting a drink with your friends that wasn't there, you know. And I think that's a really cool snapshot what you're going to provide for us, which again I would encourage everybody to pre-order Bartentine on tatteredcover.com for gifts or for yourself. It might be interesting for you to reach out and see what people in that profession, what they experienced. You know, it gives you a nice window into their world. I want to ask too about you in quarantine. Obviously, you turned it into something very interesting by coming up with the idea for this book, which sounds like it came out of a charity project. But how did it affect you? And was there any secret recipes that you came up with that you want to share with us at the time?
Yeah, it was really just so much time in my backyard with my dogs and my kids doing virtual school. My wife, bless her heart, working in the Vanderbilt emergency room throughout the pandemic. So that was really intense. She would come home and I would hear what's going on there. And, you know, I just remember the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, she would come home and just kind of have that look like, this is bad. This is what all of us have been fearing for so long. So it was tough from that standpoint. And you try to like shield your children a little bit from, you know, all of that stuff, to the point where it got to be so long that you really just have to start leveling with them about everything. And they handled it really well. And, you know, they were great. My daughter did really well in virtual school and was just reading like crazy and writing. And I think it was cool, her being around the house so much. And I was either trying to do virtual book stuff or writing a book, and then so she started writing books. And she would write a book, and she had a stapler, and she was like stapling together these books. And
My heart,
like,
my English major heart.
yeah, she would be like, Dad, I wrote a book, just so you know. Here you go. And so,
No big deal.
yeah, it was, you know, there was a lot of positives about just being at home more, and, you know, being the stay-at-home dad, really. And yeah, just it gave me a lot of time. You know, I talk about how while I was writing Garden to Glass, and while I was at the same time getting ready to open a tiki bar, my garden did not look very well. I'd be up in the room writing. I could look out at the garden. I'd be like, gosh, it's a mess. And here I am writing, here, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm like, I can't even do it myself right now. But during last year and last summer, I really got to overhaul things. I got to like take the knowledge that I felt like I had accumulated over the years and really put it to action a lot more. And do the things, you know, like mulching and composting and all these things that are so important to your garden. I really got to put them into action 24/7 and grow things that I'd always wanted to grow, use them in different ways. And by last fall, I was harvesting herbs and drying them. And then when I was like, what am I going to do with all this stuff? My friend Tyler from Love and Exile Wines in Nashville, we had always talked about making a vermouth. And I was like, I've got a bunch of stuff to put in a vermouth. Let's do this. So made a fun project out of that.
That's awesome. You know, there's positives and negatives that have come out of this quarantine, this pandemic right now. I want to, on behalf of myself and other viewers, thank your wife as a first responder. Please extend that to her. It's a huge thank you for the heroism that she's done over the past 16, 17 months.
Thank you. She's a rock star.
Yeah, absolutely. We have two more questions here before we end today, and I really like this one. I have to ask it. What is the weirdest combination that you've ever tried that actually worked?
Great question. I would say a lot of times I really enjoy when regular guests or guests that I've known for many years would come in and they would just be like, make me something weird. Make me something, you know, off the top of your head. Play some jazz. We would call it playing some jazz. I was like, all right, you want me to play some jazz? All right. So one time I made this drink that was like mezcal, grapefruit, lemon, yellow chartreuse, Benedictine, and shiso, which we had. And it was all these wild things. I was like, how is this going to work? But everything worked really well because what it came out to be was like herbs that you would smoke over a wooden fire or something like that. From the smokiness from the mezcal, you can really get a lot of flavor using like mezcal or tequila, which has sort of that vegetal flavor. You can get so many flavors from harnessing those savory and or smoky flavors with like herbs and vegetables, beets, celery. I talk a lot about celery in the book. Celery is a great one to use with like tequila and mezcal. And so those are really like where they sound weird if you're like mezcal, beets, strawberries, shiso, basil. But it worked. A lot of those things really worked really well.
That's awesome. I love calling it playing some jazz. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my favorite things to do at the Green Russell, and you just order, you know, they're like, make me something. This is what I feel like. It's so cool to see what you all come up with. The last question is one that we love to ask here at Tattered Cover at author events, and so interpret it as you will.
Mm.
But what did this book, Garden to Glass, teach you?
I think what it taught me was probably the hardest thing that you could do is just to stare at the empty page when you're either starting the book. I still remember it, or starting a chapter, and you're just frightened, and you're like, how do I get to the end of this? And you're like, it's like looking up at some huge mountain. You're like, how am I going to climb this? But I think what I learned the most about that and getting through that fear and getting through it, what I really enjoyed about the process is going back and editing. So you're on the second round of edits, you're on the third round of edits. And I found I really enjoyed that because you're like, if you step away from something for a month or 6 weeks, and then you come back to it with fresh eyes and a fresh mind and new perspective, maybe that you've gained as you've just sat and stared at the wall and thought about it, which is definitely a part of it. That's the stuff I really enjoyed. And that's what I enjoyed too with Bartentine, where I was just like hammering it out. And then working on the hard copy version where I expanded it. I added home bar tips. I added some of the just essential bare bones stuff. I really enjoyed going back to that because those were the drinks that I would teach new bartenders, or I would teach trainees, or I've even done like home cocktail classes that's all about old fashioned in Manhattan. And I love those. And so it was fun to go back and, but I'd say editing yourself and really honing the book, I could just keep doing that. I love that.
That's amazing though. And I love hearing writers talk about their process, and it's something that, we often get a lot of people watching our videos and stuff who really they aspire to be published writers in many genres. And so hearing the different ways that people overcome that mountain, that empty page, that they really push themselves forward is always really inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for this book. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We were so thrilled to have you here. One comment that did pop up before I close out here was, wow, I just made the gin and tonic, but with frozen berries. I only have a wee balcony, but I include growing herbs. I've used Botano by Eden Mills in St. Andrews, Scotland. Thank you so much, from Rosie. So
awesome.
She said
Well,
she loved it.
Frozen berries are kind of fun. I can tell her that frozen berries are a great way to make like a champagne cocktail. So take a frozen berry, throw a dash of bitters on top of it, pour in sparkling wine. And you'll notice what happens a lot of times is little pieces off the berry come floating off with the sparkling wine. And then you get these little bits of almost like a freeze-dried berry as you're drinking your sparkling wine. So you can definitely use frozen berries to your advantage.
See, that's perfect. Look at us getting even more recipes and recommendations out of Mike Wolf here, which if you want more of them, you need to make sure that you order Garden to Glass and his newest book, Bartentine, which you can pre-order at tattercover.com. Mike, I want to give you a chance to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and anything else you want to say before we close out this afternoon.
Well, just thanks everybody for the questions. The questions were great. Thank you for hosting. Thanks to Tattered Cover. I bought many special books there over the years. I used to live off St. Paul when the Colfax store opened, and that was just incredible. I bought a signed first edition of Anthony Bourdain's Medium Raw, which is like one of my treasured books that I have. I got at that Tattered Cover, Walking the Green Carpet. So I love you guys, and I'm on Instagram, Mike Wolf _ Garden to Glass. I think that's about all the social media that I do. I do host a podcast called Liquid Gold that you can find everywhere. You can find on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get podcasts. That's and also you can check out our page on weownthistown.net. It's We Own This Town Podcast Network out of Nashville, Tennessee. And then we're on Instagram at Liquid Gold _ pod. That's with my buddy Kenneth. So we tackle all kinds of different drinks, ingredients, pairings. We do a lot of pairings come Thanksgiving time and the holidays. And then for the summer, we call it the Summer of Shots, where we cover all kinds of different quick drinks or an easy shot or how to make the best, tequila sunrise, like fun stuff like that. We have a ton of fun.
We need to do a book one. We need to have a Tattered Cover come and do book recommendations or something. Book and drinks. That's awesome.
You bet. Let's do it. Let's schedule that.
Okay, well, follow Mike on Instagram and his podcast, Liquid Gold. Make sure you get Garden to Glass and Bartentine at tattercover.com. This has been an amazing event. Perfect to start our summer off with. I know that I'm already in. Okay, say the pineapple one again. What is it?
Tepache.
Tepache. I'm already very inspired by that if I can remember the name of it. But that's what a recording is for. I'm McKaylee with Tattered Cover Bookstore. Mike, if you'll stick around while I just close this out here. Thanks, thank you all so much for shopping locally. Maybe for dinner, you can order from a local mom and pop restaurant. Go to your local bar. Support those who have been hurt most by this pandemic. We thank you all so much for your continued support. Garden to Glass by Mike Wolf is at tattercover.com, as well as Bartentine. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and happy reading. Bye, all. And we're out.